Now, in livestock news, cattle numbers are at the lowest they have been in 60 years. The USDA surveying over 36,000 producers across the country. The agency finding beef cattle numbers are down from last year, bringing the total to almost 28 million beef cattle nationwide. Josh St. Peters is the executive vice president of the Illinois Beef Association, and he joins us explaining why this is and what it can mean for grocery store prices.
We're going to jump right in to the USDA that's reporting that cattle numbers in the US are hitting record lows right now. And I know that there's a live cattle import ban right now in Mexico because of New World screwworm. Are there any other factors that are directly impacting these US cattle numbers?
I think it's important to remember that the cattle cycle is longer than a lot of other commodities in the U.S. marketplace. And so this is really, this has been coming for quite a while, and something that is just a reality of where we're at in the economic cycle. You're right about the short-term impacts we've seen from limited imports with the New World screwworm. But really, if you go back a couple of years ago, we started seeing this tightening of supply as the cattle herd was getting smaller, driven by the economic conditions, but also driven by droughts that we saw in big parts of cattle country. We talk about here in the Midwest where we see regional droughts across multi-county areas that may last several months. But when you move to the South and the Southwest, we've got some states that are big cattle states traditionally, where they've been dealing with drought for almost a decade. And so that drove a lot of liquidation. Market conditions also gave folks an opportunity to take a profit on cattle. And ultimately, in the end here over the last couple of years, it's led to a point where we really are at a generational low as far as tight supplies. Really 60 years since we've seen cattle numbers this tight in the U.S. marketplace.
Yeah, and just like general supply and demand, obviously, if you have a low supply of cattle, prices are really well for livestock producers right now. What's the morale like in the industry?
The market definitely has been strong for producers and the prices they're being paid in the countryside, but the cost of production are high for beef, just like they are for everything else in the economy. And, inflation's been a reality on the farm, just the same as it's been in town. And so the cost for the fuel that runs the tractors, the cost of the tractors and trucks, the feed, all the things it takes to raise that animal and produce that pound of beef have seen an increase in costs as well. So it's taken a very sharp pencil to focus on profitability for producers in these situations. But I would say producers, the sentiment across the board has been a positive one. Seeing those strong prices, and especially seeing great consumer demand. We continue to see folks buying a lot of beef at the grocery store, beef doing well on menus. And so as long as we're satisfying consumers with a lean and nutritious protein, I think those market conditions should stay strong.
Exactly, and you touched on grocery store prices, which is my next question. If if the prices are, if numbers are low, is that going to impact the how expensive beef is in the grocery store?
We have seen higher prices across the board in the grocery store, right? A lot of conversation around the coffee pot at work about what the price looks like for all groceries in the U.S. right now, and a lot of conversations across the nation around what should be done or could be done to help mitigate those increased costs to U.S. consumers and in our own households. Beef prices are no exception to that. But we do have, a very nutrient dense, lean, healthy protein that brings a lot of flavor. That's really versatile for folks to use, whether they're cooking on the grill at home or cooking for the kids at the stove. And so we've seen good demand. Now, as prices have stayed higher, it certainly puts a floor on what those prices look like, and it squeezes what the profit margin looks like for the processors and the folks throughout the value chain as well. And that's something we're watching very closely, and economists are monitoring month to month as we look at these USDA reports and understand where we're at in the cycle and when we'll start rebuilding the herd, or when we'll start seeing an expansion of more cattle on feed to increase supply of beef in the U.S.
And you mentioned feed there. There's a lot of grain producers in this area. They have a little bit of a different economic outlook right now, but is any of this going to impact the grain that they're growing?
Great question. Yeah, a lot of our U.S. beef producers in this part of the country are also grain farmers as well. And certainly, you're right that the economic conditions for a bushel of corn look different today than where we were at a couple years ago. I think it's really important to look at the relationship we have between the U.S. cattle inventory and the U.S. corn grower. There's a symbiotic relationship there where it's an important balance. And so we want to make sure that we maintain demand for feed, because that does help support what those prices look like for a bushel of corn at the elevator in the countryside. But everybody is paying close attention to what that profitability looks like for the row crop farmer as well, because the cattle producer can't do what they do without their neighboring corn grower helping put food in the feed bunks.
Well, let's